Yugo sits in his room, completely absorbed in the TV as a team of armored heroes unleashes a blazing transformation. Flames swirl around them, and their powerful poses ignite his excitement. The moment their final form appears, his whole expression brightens. He jumps up from his seat, fists clenched with enthusiasm, shouting in delight at finally seeing the long-awaited Volca Roja transformation. His admiration for the heroes fills the room with an almost childlike energy, so much that he barely notices someone calling his name from behind. Even then, he turns with the same shining eyes, still glowing with the thrill of what he just witnessed. Yugo's excitement from watching his heroes lingers as he rushes through the morning. He's jolted back to reality when he notices the time, and a small panic sparks in his chest. He was supposed to head out much earlier. His mother calls out from the kitchen, reminding him of the very thing he just realized, while his father quietly watches, amused by the familiar routine. With a flustered shout that he'll return later, Yugo hurries out the door. The cool air outside hits him as he jogs down the street, still adjusting the strap of his bag across his shoulder. He carries himself with an easy, everyday energy, blending naturally into the flow of people around him. In his own thoughts, he describes himself plainly, just an ordinary student, nothing particularly special. Yet as he moves along, he pauses for a moment, noticing his own reflection in a window. Something unspoken lingers behind his eyes, as if there's one trait about himself that stands apart from the rest, something he hasn't yet said aloud. As Yugo hurries along the street, his eyes catch a giant billboard above the theater. Bright, flaming warriors posed heroically for the announcement of their next movie. The sight stops him in his tracks. His heart swells with the same admiration he felt earlier at home, and he pumps a fist with barely contained excitement. Even in public, he can't hide how much he adores these heroes, thinking to himself that he might as well be a full-fledged hero otaku. Images of all the figures he loves flash through his mind. The blazing team he's followed for so long, a graceful magical girl whose transformation he finds beautiful, and even a daring motorcycle hero who embodies speed and courage. To him, every one of them is precious, and he silently confesses that he loves them all. As he resumes walking, his thoughts drift toward what being a hero means: standing for peace, offering strength to the weak, pushing back against anything that threatens others. These ideals tug at him with a quiet longing, as if the dreams he's cherished since childhood are still alive and urging him forward. Yugo's steps slow when he spots an elderly woman struggling with a heavy bag. Without hesitation, he calls out to her with a warm smile and rushes to her side. Even though the bag is bulky, he lifts it without complaint. The woman worries about the weight, but he reassures her brightly, saying he's been training. Moments like this remind him of how deeply he has always loved heroes. Long before he even realized it, their courage and kindness had shaped his own dreams. He wanted to be just like them, someone who steps forward when others need help. Even without special devices, transformations, or spectacular techniques, he believes he can still make a difference. That simple confidence shines in his eyes as he tells himself that helping people is enough to feel like a hero. His dream is clear: to become a police officer or a firefighter, someone whose whole purpose is to protect others. With that ambition in his heart, he continues down the street, walking with steady determination. Every day, he pushes himself to work a little harder, trying to grow into the kind of hero he has admired all his life. After parting ways with the elderly woman, Yugo heads to a large shopping complex, excitement already bubbling inside him. He walks straight into a store, greeting the clerk with a grateful smile as he picks up the latest issue of his favorite hero series. Just holding it in his hands makes him light up. He has been eagerly waiting for this month's release. The store is buzzing with energy because of its opening day, and Yugo feels that the long line he endured was completely worth it. The issue comes with a limited Volca red soft vinyl figure, something that immediately brings back the joy he felt watching the transformation earlier that morning. As he steps out, he notices a little boy tugging his mother's hand, excitedly pointing at the very same hero that Yugo admires. Hearing the child shout "It's Volca Roja" makes Yugo smile softly. For a moment, he stands there in silence, watching the child's pure enthusiasm, a reflection of the same wonder he still carries. Even surrounded by strangers, Yugo feels connected to anyone who shares that love for heroes. It reassures him that his passion isn't strange or childish, it's something that brings people together, no matter their age. With his new issue secured, Yugo heads into a quieter alley, mentally planning his workout. He pumps himself up, deciding on a quick run followed by bench presses, another small step toward becoming the kind of person who can protect others. But as he turns a corner, the air changes. A sudden scream tears through the street. People scatter in panic, their footsteps echoing sharply against the buildings. Yugo's eyes widen as he spots the source of the chaos, a hooded man wielding a knife, advancing toward a terrified couple. Shouts of "Run," and "He has a knife" ring out, but fear freezes many in place. Faced with the kind of danger he has only imagined until now, Yugo stands at the edge of the unfolding crisis, his heart thundering. Everything he admires about heroes, every ideal he holds, suddenly feels terrifyingly real. And now, he has to decide what to do. Chaos spreads as the attacker steps forward, his expression twisted with desperation and fury. He mutters that nothing matters anymore, his grip tightening around the knife as he declares he'll drag everyone around him into his madness. His voice carries a chilling resolve that sends another wave of panic through the crowd. In the midst of the confusion, a small boy, likely distracted or frozen in fear, stumbles. His feet tangle beneath him, and he crashes to the ground with a frightened cry. His fall draws the attacker's gaze, and for a heartbeat, everything narrows to that vulnerable child sitting helplessly on the pavement. The boy's wide eyes shimmer with confusion and fear as he lifts his head, unaware of just how close danger is looming behind him. And Yugo, watching this unfold, faces the moment that separates dreams from reality, where the choice to act or freeze will define what kind of person he truly is. The attacker's focus locks onto the fallen boy, and a twisted grin spreads across his face. Raising the knife, he declares that the child will be the first. His voice cuts through the panic like ice, leaving no doubt of his intent. Yugo's breath catches in his throat. For a heartbeat, fear claws at him, but the sight of the trembling child pushes everything else aside. His body moves before his thoughts can catch up. With a desperate burst of energy, he lunges forward. His mind races with a single plea: reach him, hurry, run. Yugo stretches out his hand, every muscle straining as he sprints toward the boy. His expression is wide with urgency, the determination in his eyes fierce and raw. He refuses to let the attacker take another step closer. In that instant, Yugo doesn't look like someone who simply admires heroes. He looks like someone becoming one. The boy squeezes his eyes shut, bracing for the worst, but before the attacker can reach him, Yugo throws himself into the path. Without slowing, he plants his feet firmly between the child and the knife-wielding man. His body moves on instinct, shielding the boy with his entire frame. The attacker's momentum clashes with Yugo's sudden intervention, the force of their encounter rippling through the air. Yugo stands tall, back straight, shoulders squared, an unshakable barrier. Behind him, the child stares up in shock, realizing someone has stepped in to protect him. For the first time, there's a glimmer of safety in his wide eyes. Yugo may not have powers, armor, or a heroic title, but in that moment, he embodies every ideal he's ever admired. He stands as a hero. The attacker, startled by Yugo's sudden intervention, reacts with vicious desperation. He thrusts his knife forward, but Yugo doesn't flinch. Instead, he grabs the man's arm with both hands, twisting with all the strength his training has given him. The impact of their struggle reverberates through the space, and the attacker's balance crumbles. With a powerful shove, Yugo drives him backward. The man's eyes widen in shock just before he crashes to the ground. Yugo follows through, pinning him down with a firm knee to the chest, refusing to give the attacker even a moment to recover. The boy, still sitting on the ground nearby, watches with trembling awe as Yugo forces the weapon out of the man's grasp. The attacker gasps, overwhelmed by the sudden reversal, his earlier confidence shattered. Yugo's breath is heavy, but his eyes burn with resolve. In this moment, raw, dangerous, and real, he has done exactly what he always admired in others. He protected someone who needed help. As the attacker collapses beneath him, Yugo's chest heaves with relief. The danger has passed. The boy is safe. For a brief, shining moment, a proud smile spreads across his face. He feels the rush of accomplishment flood through him. He did it. The words slip out breathlessly as warmth swells in his chest. For the first time in his life, he truly feels like a hero. But the feeling lasts only an instant. A strange heaviness tugs at his body, and confusion clouds his expression. He glances down, expecting exhaustion, maybe trembling nerves, but instead, he sees something he can't quite understand. His hand comes away wet and dark. He lowers his gaze fully and freezes. The knife the attacker had been wielding is lodged deeply into his own chest. Yugo stares at it in stunned silence, his earlier smile fading into disbelief. The warm pride inside him is replaced by something cold and sinking, and his voice trembles as he whispers, barely comprehending the sight before him. What is this? Yugo's legs give out beneath him. The shock, the pain, and the realization hit all at once, and his body collapses onto the cold floor. The boy he protected scrambles toward him, his small hands trembling as he calls out desperately. His voice cracks with fear, tears welling as he stares at the young man who had stood between him and danger. To the child, Yugo isn't just a stranger anymore, he's the kindest person he has ever met. Someone who stepped forward when no one else could. Yugo's vision blurs, but a faint smile touches his lips. His thoughts drift softly, not toward regret, but toward the simple truth warming his heart. The boy is safe. The knowledge brings him a strange, peaceful comfort even as everything around him fades. In the end, I saved him, he thinks, as though reassuring himself. Even with his strength slipping away, he clings to that one feeling that maybe, just maybe, this isn't such a bad way for things to end. But beneath that gentle acceptance, another voice rises within him, firm and rejecting the idea that this is the end. No. Something in him refuses to let this be his final moment. The boy's face crumples as he calls out to Yugo, tears spilling down his cheeks. His small shoulders shake, and the raw grief in his expression pierces through the fading haze of Yugo's consciousness. Seeing that heartbreak hits him harder than the injury itself. The heroes Yugo has admired his whole life, the ones he dreamed of becoming, would never allow a child to cry like this. They would smile, protect, reassure. They would stand strong so the young wouldn't have to feel this kind of fear. But here he is, lying helplessly on the ground while the child he tried to protect breaks down beside him. A hollow ache settles in Yugo's chest, deeper than the wound. He blames himself for letting things end this way, whispering inwardly that he must be a failure of a hero if he allowed the boy to cry like that. Yet beneath the pain and regret, a single thought rises, quiet but fierce. If I had the chance, if I could live again. His fading vision fills with determination. I would become the kind of hero who never lets a child cry. As Yugo's consciousness drifts, the world around him dissolves into a soft, weightless darkness. In that quiet space, the image of a towering hero's silhouette rises before his mind, strong, confident, and radiant, the very embodiment of everything he has ever admired. He imagines himself standing in that place, not as someone ordinary, but as the greatest hero in the world, someone capable of saving everyone. His thoughts steady with a newfound clarity. If he were given another chance, if he could start again from the beginning, then he would devote his entire existence to becoming a true hero. Not the kind who shines only in fantasy, but someone who can genuinely protect lives and wipe away the tears of those who cry out for help. He pictures the child's trembling face once more, the pain in those young eyes fueling a quiet vow deep within him. He wouldn't let emotions like that surface ever again, not if he could help it. In that silent darkness, Yugo makes a promise to himself. He will become a hero who can save those fragile smiles, a hero capable of protecting everyone. And with that determination glowing faintly inside him, he lets his eyes close, carrying the wish of a new beginning. As the last fragments of Yugo's consciousness drift into darkness, a sharp sound suddenly slices through the void, metal ringing, footsteps echoing across a vast hall. His heavy eyelids flutter open, not to the familiar world he left behind, but to an entirely different scene. He finds himself staring upward at towering pillars and an arched ceiling, a place that resembles an ancient fortress rather than anything from his old life. The air feels cold, tense, alive with danger. Before him stands a young man holding a gleaming sword, its blade reflecting an otherworldly glow. His posture is firm and commanding, the stance of someone who has faced countless battles. With a voice that carries authority, he calls out a name. Yugo Clay. Yugo, or whoever this body belongs to, feels the name resonate inside him, as if it is supposed to be his. The man wielding the sword steps forward, locking eyes with Yugo with a mix of urgency and expectation. The moment is surreal, disorienting, yet unmistakably real. Yugo wished for another chance. And now, it seems he has awakened in a new life, one already entangled in conflict. The young man with the sword stands tall, lowering his blade only slightly as he declares the outcome of the confrontation. His voice is calm and absolute. He has won the duel. The words echo across the hall, drawing gasps and murmurs from the surrounding students. Yugo, still disoriented inside this new body, looks down at himself in confusion. His clothes are unfamiliar, a decorated uniform, elegant and formal, nothing like anything he wore in his old life. His heartbeat pounds unevenly, trying to catch up with the reality unfolding before him. The victor continues, stating that according to their promise, he will now be taking someone named Claire. A collective stir ripples through the room. The name carries weight, and every student's attention snaps toward them. Yugo's eyes widen, instinctively reacting with surprise just as the students around them murmur in disbelief. A girl with long, curled hair steps forward, her expression tense as she calls out to the swordsman with a mix of admiration and unease, Zenon-sama. Pieces of this world begin to fall into place, but only enough to show Yugo one thing clearly. He's stepped into the middle of someone else's conflict, one he doesn't understand yet. And yet, all eyes are suddenly on him. The girl named Claire steps forward, her long curls swaying as she looks between Zenon and the young man collapsed on the floor. Yugo in his new body. Confusion flickers across her face, but Zenon doesn't give her time to piece things together. With a confident stride, he approaches her and gestures toward the defeated Yugo Clay behind him. He explains that he has won the duel against the boy who has supposedly been tormenting her. His tone is triumphant, as if he has just liberated her from some great burden. Claire's eyes widen. Her hand rises to her chest as she tries to process what's happening, her cheeks slowly blooming with a flush. The sudden turn of events leaves her visibly shaken. Zenon continues with practiced smoothness. According to their previous agreement, Claire's engagement to Hugo Clay is now void. And with a gentle smile, gentle, but clearly self-assured, he declares that from this moment on, he will be the one to protect her. Claire's breath hitches, her face reddening further as she whispers his name with trembling admiration. Meanwhile, Yugo, still struggling to understand this world and the situation he's been dropped into, watches as the role of the villain he has reincarnated into is stripped away right before his eyes. He has barely arrived, and already the story around him is moving rapidly, without waiting for him to catch up. Claire bows her head in gratitude, thanking Zenon with a flustered voice that trembles between relief and admiration. The surrounding students burst into applause, celebrating the resolution of a conflict Yugo barely understands. Their cheerful voices echo through the courtyard, completely ignoring the stunned boy sitting on the ground. Yugo, trapped inside Hugo Clay's body. He watches the scene unfold as if it were happening on a distant stage, utterly disconnected from it. His thoughts swirl in chaos. Nothing fits. Nothing makes sense. Moments ago, he died protecting a child, yet now he's witnessing a drama between nobles, duels, and broken engagements. What is happening? He can't piece together why this moment, one that clearly belongs to someone else, feels like the final scene he's destined to witness. A sudden heaviness washes over him. His vision blurs, and the edges darken like ink seeping across the page. His body sways, as if the world is slipping away a second time. Panic and resignation mix inside him. Why, do I have to watch this right before dying again? Is this some kind of flashback? A dream? His breath catches, and a sinking certainty forms in his chest. This time, this might truly be my end. Just as Yugo's awareness begins to fade, something jolts him violently awake. His eyes snap open, and instead of darkness, he's staring at a ceiling plain, unfamiliar, and very much real. His breath catches, and he pushes himself upright with a startled gasp. The world around him is quiet. The terror, the duel, the collapsing vision, all of it is gone. He finds himself sitting on a bed in what looks like a small infirmary, the kind found in an academy or a noble estate. Sunlight filters through the windows, warm and calm, a stark contrast to the chaos he remembers. His hands tremble as he touches his chest, expecting to feel the agonizing wound that ended his life. But there is nothing. No pain. No blood. Not even a scar. Confusion surges through him. What is this place? He knows he should be dead. The knife had pierced him right in the chest. Yet he's here, breathing, whole, alive. His heartbeat races as he tries to piece together the impossible truth. He has survived death. Or perhaps, something far stranger has happened. And the realization begins to dawn on him that this isn't a dream, nor the afterlife. He has awakened into a new reality. Yugo pushes himself to his feet, still shaky, and instinctively walks toward what looks like the infirmary's large window. The moment he catches his reflection in the glass, his breath stops. A young man stares back at him, tall, sharp-featured, and undeniably handsome. His hair is different, his jawline more defined, and his eyes carry a confidence he doesn't recognize. For a moment he simply freezes, unable to reconcile the reflection with the person he thinks he is. Who the heck is that? The shock bursts out of him before he can contain it. He spins around, half convinced someone else must be standing behind him. But the room is empty. Slowly, he raises a trembling finger toward the glass again, pointing at his own reflection. Could that really be me? His heart pounds with disbelief. He takes another look, this time more carefully, and a strange flutter rises in his chest. The longer he stares, the more undeniable it becomes. He's handsome. Extremely handsome. Way beyond anything he ever imagined for himself. A disbelieving laugh slips out of him as he hides his burning face with both hands. Looking at myself again, I'm really good looking, but this realization only deepens the mystery. If that's his face now, then what exactly has happened to him? Just as Yugo is reeling from the shock of seeing his new face, the infirmary door swings open with a sharp, echoing sound. Boots strike the floor in a firm, disciplined rhythm as a stern-looking man steps inside. His uniform is immaculate, decorated with medals and epaulets, an unmistakable sign of high rank and authority. Yugo's eyes widen. The intensity in the man's gaze is almost suffocating, and Yugo instinctively wonders if this stranger is some kind of high-ranking official, or worse, someone who knows the original Hugo Clay personally. Before Yugo can speak, the man's stern voice cuts through the room like a whip. With cold finality, he declares that Hugo Clay is now disowned. His tone drips with disappointment and fury, each word sharp enough to leave an invisible wound. You are a disgrace to our family. The accusation crashes into Yugo like a blow. Shock shoots through him, and he blurts out a confused cry before he can stop himself. He hadn't even begun to understand this new identity, and already he's being stripped of its last remaining ties. The man stands rigid, unyielding, as if delivering a sentence that has been long overdue, completely unaware that the boy before him is no longer the Yugo he knew. And Yugo is left standing there, stunned and speechless, thrown headfirst into a life spiraling out of control. The stern man's disapproval hangs heavily in the air as he steps further into the infirmary. His voice remains cold and cutting while Yugo, still trapped inside Hugo Clay's body, sits on the bed, bewildered and powerless. He begins by expressing how deeply disappointed he is. To him, being defeated by someone who seemingly appeared out of nowhere, even if that person wielded a sacred sword, is an unforgivable humiliation. Each word is sharp with resentment, carved from pride and expectation. He continues, explaining that he had tolerated Hugo's past behavior only because of his talent. He had overlooked many faults, believing ability alone could justify them. But now, with the duel lost and the engagement broken, any patience he once had has dissolved. Yugo watches him with a blank stare, tiny question marks practically floating above his head. None of this relates to him, yet he's suddenly held responsible for someone else's sins. Then the man jabs a finger toward him with a final, merciless verdict. You, who have stained the Clay family name, are no longer useful. The words strike like a blow. Yugo isn't just disowned, he's discarded as worthless, labeled a burden, stripped of every social tie the original Hugo Clay possessed. The weight of those accusations presses down on him, even though they belong to a life he never lived. And yet, behind all the shock and confusion, a new question begins to form in Yugo's mind. What kind of life did Hugo Clay lead, for his own family to reject him like this? The man's condemnation still hangs heavy in the room when Yugo finally gathers the courage to speak. He forces an awkward smile, scratching the back of his head with embarrassment as he tries to ease the tension. Sorry, but I honestly have no idea what you're talking about. His voice trembles slightly, not out of guilt but sheer confusion. In his old life, he never imagined waking up in a stranger's body, let alone being scolded for actions he didn't commit. But to this man, Yugo's innocence sounds like blatant disrespect. A vein bulges on the man's forehead as his anger spikes. He slams a fist onto the nearest surface, barking at Yugo to stop babbling nonsense. His glare sharpens as he takes a step forward, as if trying to confirm whether the boy in front of him is mocking him or simply lost his mind. Yugo flinches, realizing too late that Hugo Clay must have been someone this man knew very well, someone tied to his expectations, his pride, and apparently, his disappointment. The man suddenly turns on his heel with a sharp motion. His patience has run out. Without looking back, he orders Yugo to immediately return a sword called Galandil and to leave the dormitory at once. His tone makes it clear, he wants nothing to do with Hugo Clay anymore. Yugo reaches out instinctively, calling for him to wait, but the man doesn't even slow his stride. The door swings shut with a final, resounding thud, leaving Yugo alone in the infirmary. Disinherited, kicked out, and still unsure who he is supposed to be in this new world, Yugo is left staring at the door in stunned silence, his new life beginning with nothing but confusion and loss. The door slams shut so hard that the frame rattles, leaving Yugo staring at the empty space where the man stood just seconds ago. The echo of his shout still vibrates in the air, commands to never use the Clay family name again, cold reminders that the tuition had been paid only out of obligation, and nothing more. Yugo lets out a long sigh, rubbing his face with both hands. He just said what he wanted and left. Even though the man's tone carried a familiarity, Yugo can't recognize him as any sort of father figure. The man's words, his posture, the way he practically barked orders, none of it matches the warm, gentle memories Yugo has of his own father from his previous life. This stern noble feels more like a stranger wearing the title of parent. He crosses his arms, thinking it over with a troubled expression. He talks like he's supposed to be my father, but he's nothing like the dad I knew. Not by a long shot. Everything about him screams outsider, from the cold dismissal to the lack of a single ounce of concern. Yugo can't help but feel like the original Hugo Clay must have gone through this kind of treatment often. As he tries to make sense of it, the infirmary door opens again, this time quietly. A younger boy with dark hair and sharp eyes steps in, his voice calling out with a mix of worry and relief. Ni-san. His expression softens the moment he sees Yugo awake, and for the first time since arriving in this strange world, Yugo is confronted not with hostility, but with someone who seems genuinely concerned for him. The little boy, with wide eyes and a worried expression, tells him that his father stormed out and asks if Yugo is alright. Yugo freezes. A boy. Big brother. In that instant, he understands something unsettling. This boy is calling him Big Brother. His mind goes blank. Yugo tries to maintain his composure while frantically thinking that there's no way, but everything seems to indicate that he really has been reborn as Yugo Clay, this boy's older brother. The little boy notices his reaction and asks if something is wrong, but Yugo can barely manage to reply, "No, it's nothing." As the silence stretched, Yugo finally admitted the question that had been burning inside him. He apologized, rubbing the back of his neck, and asked who the boy even was. The child froze in shock, eyes wide, his expression twisting as if the ground beneath him had suddenly vanished. The boy asked if Yugo had lost his memory because of the duel, his voice trembling with fear and uncertainty. Yugo, having no better explanation himself, could only respond with a vague perhaps, though the truth was far more complicated than memory loss. Trying to navigate the moment without worsening the boy's distress, Yugo asked him to explain who he was, who Yugo himself was supposed to be, and what their relationship was. The boy hesitated, tears beginning to well at the corners of his eyes, as if answering meant acknowledging something painful. And as the question hung between them, Yugo felt the reality of his situation tighten around him. He was living someone else's life, and the people around him already expected him to be a person he had never met. The boy steadied himself, wiping his eyes before forcing a small, trembling smile. With gentle patience, he began explaining everything Yugo couldn't remember. He told him that his name was Yugo Clay, the eldest son of the prestigious knight family known as the Clays. As the family's firstborn, Yugo was also the heir to their most treasured legacy, the sacred sword Galendil. Then the boy introduced himself. He said his name was Phi Clay, Hugo's younger half-brother. Though he tried to laugh it off, there was a fragile bitterness beneath his words as he admitted that, because he was physically weak, he couldn't become a knight like Yugo. Even so, he had clearly admired the role, and his eyes held a quiet longing that he tried to hide behind a wavering smile. To help Yugo understand the situation better, Phi reminded him of the duel he'd had before collapsing, the one that had apparently cost Yugo his memories. As he spoke, flashes of the duel rose in Yugo's mind, blurry and disjointed, as if belonging to someone else entirely. Phi's explanation, though earnest, only deepened Yugo's realization. The life he had opened his eyes to was one filled with expectations, lineage, and duty, none of which belonged to him. As Phi continued explaining, Yugo felt the weight of the situation settle onto him. The duel he had seen in fragmented flashes became clearer. Yugo had lost. That single defeat, according to Phi, had been enough for their father to brand it a disgrace upon the family. The boy's voice trembled as he repeated the harsh words he had overheard, unable to hide how much they had pained him as well. But the consequences of that loss didn't end there. Phi explained that Yugo's fiancée, Claire, had been taken away as part of a wager Yugo himself had made. Yugo watched disbelief dawn upon him, deep, sudden, and almost comically dramatic as he realized what that implied. The idea struck him like lightning. This felt exactly like the setup where someone reincarnates as the villain of a story, doomed by the original person's mistakes. Yet beneath that burst of panic was a growing sense of clarity. Yugo's expression steadied as he pieced together the truth. This wasn't simply a strange dream or a distortion before death. This was something else entirely. A different world. A different life. And he now occupied the role of someone who had already drowned in his own failures. Phi watched him anxiously, clutching his hands together as Yugo muttered to himself, trying to grasp the nature of this new existence. Though the boy didn't fully understand, he still waited quietly, ready to help however he could. Yugo exhaled deeply. For the first time since opening his eyes in this unfamiliar place, he felt he finally understood the essence of what had happened to him. Late that night, Yugo found himself lying awake, staring up at the dark canopy of trees instead of the elegant ceiling of the mansion he'd woken up in. The rustling leaves and distant night sounds replaced the refined silence of the Clay estate, and the chilly air seeped through his borrowed sleeping bag. He let out a long, defeated sigh as he looked toward the towering mansion in the distance. Despite having been thrust into the role of the disgraced eldest son of a noble house, he had somehow ended the day exiled to the woods like an unwanted guest. The contrast hit him all at once. Just hours before, he had been inside a luxurious room, recovering in what seemed like a noble's infirmary. Now he was wrapped in a sleeping bag on the cold ground, hidden among the trees. His face twisted into an exhausted, blank stare. Everything about this world still felt unreal, but the uncomfortable dirt beneath him reminded him otherwise. He couldn't help but mutter to himself, wondering how things had spiraled so quickly. How had he gone from being treated as the heir of a prestigious family, to camping outside like an outcast? For now, with no clearer answers and nowhere else to go, he could only curl deeper into his sleeping bag and endure the night. After spending a cold night curled up in a sleeping bag, Yugo finally understands where he has ended up. The grand building looming over him isn't just any place, it's the prestigious Academia Luminosa, an elite school where young nobles train to become magical knights. As he observes the elegant halls and well-dressed students moving about, he pieces the situation together. Somehow, after dying in his original world, he has awakened in the body of a man with almost the same name, Hugo Clay, yet that similarity seems to be the only advantage. This Hugo he replaced was known for being troublesome, arrogant, and generally disliked. While he tries to process this absurd twist of fate, he can't help but grumble at the irony. Even though he saved a child before dying, he now finds himself sleeping outdoors like some unwanted stray. The unfairness of it all stings, but at the same time, a strange excitement flickers inside him. This world is different, filled with magic and noble families, and he has a second chance, whether he likes the starting conditions or not. After spending the night camping outside, Hugo, or rather, the protagonist inside Hugo's body, thinks back to what Phi told him. The real Hugo was someone absolutely despised by everyone. And on this page, that reputation proves painfully true. As soon as he's kicked out of the luxurious dorm, the other students mock him without holding back. They throw insults like daggers, telling him to go die, celebrating that karma finally struck him. To them, this is payback. While hearing all of this, the protagonist tries to imagine what kind of awful things the original Hugo must have done to be hated so intensely. The page shows glimpses of a smug, arrogant Hugo, someone who flaunted his status and the power of the sacred sword, pushing others around simply because he could. It's obvious he treated people terribly, relying on his family name and privilege. But the man living in Hugo's body now isn't that person. He just wants to survive, yet his situation is miserable. Hungry, cold, and homeless, he ends up tumbling through the woods, yelling desperately for someone to help him. The contrast with the luxury he was thrown out of couldn't be sharper. It's as if he's being punished for sins he never committed. Phi finally finds Hugo camping outside and rushes over to him, relieved. He tells Hugo he brought some food from his room. Hugo, starving, gratefully accepts it without hesitation. As soon as Phi hands it over, Hugo devours the food instantly, wrapper and all, shocking Phi, who realizes just how hungry he must have been. After finishing, Hugo feels completely revitalized, loudly praising how delicious it was while Phi sits beside him, watching in amazement. Phi sits beside Hugo under the night sky, still worried about him. He apologizes softly, saying that if he had arrived sooner, Hugo wouldn't have had to suffer from hunger out in the cold. Hugo brushes off the apology with an easy smile, insisting that Phi bringing him food was more than enough and thanking him warmly. Phi's expression, however, remains troubled. After a brief hesitation, he finally asks the question that's been weighing on him, Hugo's memories, aren't they still gone? Hugo pauses, mid-bite, surprised by the directness of the question. Phi watches him intently, clearly anxious about the answer. Phi is heartbroken and apologizes while crying, saying their father is truly cruel for disowning Hugo and even kicking him out of the dorm. Hugo, however, tries to calm him down. He says maybe their father has his own reasons, and that he himself might have gone too far before, so it's not entirely unreasonable that he's being punished. Phi, desperate to help, clenches his fist and says he'll try talking to their father to see if he can get the punishment lifted. Meanwhile, Hugo sits casually on the bench, clearly not taking the situation as heavily as Phi does. Hugo reflects on Phi's kindness, appreciating how earnestly his little brother wants to help him. But Hugo knows convincing their father is impossible, especially after being angrily disowned in front of everyone. Worse, even if their father were persuaded, all the students around them would still hold hatred toward Hugo because of the original Hugo's past behavior. Realizing this, Hugo decides it's better to start over completely rather than cling to a place where he's already despised. With new determination, he resolves to rebuild his life from scratch in a completely new situation, free from the baggage of the old Hugo's reputation. Phi hands Hugo a mysterious metal bracelet, telling him to try putting it on. Hugo, still processing his sudden reincarnation and his new life, thinks about how he has no choice but to accept his situation in this world. Phi looks serious as he stretches out his hand with the object, while Hugo wonders what it is. Fi doesn't explain, he simply urges Hugo to wear it. Hugo slips the bracelet onto his wrist, unsure if he's doing it correctly. Fi tells him to try pouring his magic into it. Hugo freezes. Magic? He starts panicking as he suddenly remembers that in this world, of course, magic exists. Trying to act like he understands, he nervously mutters, "Magic, right, magic," while clearly having no clue how to use it. Hugo starts to panic internally, he has no idea how to use magic, and he wonders if manipulating magical power is just something everyone in this world can naturally do. Fi watches him with concern, which only makes Hugo more nervous. He worries that if he keeps pretending he lost his memories, Fi might stop believing him, and he doesn't want to worry the kid any more than he already has. Trying to hype himself up, Hugo clenches his fist and tells himself to focus. Even though he doesn't understand any of this magic stuff, he decides he'll try his best anyway. Hugo clenches his fist, desperately trying to do anything magical to happen. He pours every ounce of imagination and hope into the bracelet, practically begging for a miracle. For a moment he thinks, did it shine? His eyes widen in excitement, only for panic to immediately follow when nothing actually happened. He twists around in confusion, not understanding what he even did or didn't do, while still pretending he's making progress. Meanwhile, the bracelet remains perfectly still on his wrist, offering no hint of magic at all. Few moments later, a blinding surge of energy erupts around Hugo, swallowing his confusion in a burst of pure light. When the radiance clears, he stands transformed, encased in a sleek, imposing armored suit that hugs his frame like a second skin. Plates of metal interlock across his chest and limbs, glowing nodes pulse with power, and a sharp, angular helmet hides his face. His new form radiates strength and dignity, as if the bracelet had awakened something far beyond simple magic, something heroic, overwhelming, and completely unexpected. In one instant, Hugo has gone from cluelessly begging for a miracle, to embodying one. Hugo, now fully transformed into a high-tech armored form, is completely shocked. He looks at his hands and body in disbelief, shouting things like, "What is this? And what happened?" The armor looks sleek and powerful, and he tries to make sense of what he's seeing. Then he hears a voice, likely the bracelet system, mention the word blaster. Hugo repeats it, confused, wondering if that's the name of the armor. Fi, watching from the bench nearby, calmly comments that it seems like the blaster adjustment worked properly, as if this transformation is expected. Hugo, however, is losing it. He stands there in full armor, yelling, "I transformed." He's overwhelmed, amazed, and clueless about what this new ability means. Fi explains to Hugo, now fully armored in the blaster suit, how the magic tool works. By pouring magic into the bracelet, the armor materializes and can channel power through the magic crystals embedded throughout it. Those crystals let the user unleash extremely powerful punches and kicks. Fi clarifies that this blaster tool is an old magical device with only that specific function, so it doesn't replace traditional magic tools. Hugo, excited, realizes this means he can perform cool special moves. Hugo, overwhelmed and emotional, suddenly hugs him, grateful and amazed that Fi would do something so incredible for his sake. Hugo, still excited about the magical armor, lifts Fi up in pure enthusiasm, shouting about how amazing the armor is and thanking Fi, calling him the best. Fi, flustered and embarrassed, protests that it's not something to get that excited over and demands to be put down. Fi worries aloud whether Hugo is really okay with using such an old magical tool, but Hugo insists it's basically a dream-come-true transformation item. Hugo happily thanks Fi again, appreciating how his little brother keeps helping him over and over. Fi, however, is quietly surprised that Hugo is so grateful for something he sees as small. Hugo tells him that simply having someone kind by his side makes him genuinely happy. He adds that having a younger brother like Fi makes him feel like the happiest older brother in the world. Fi freezes for a moment, blushing deeply, touched by Hugo's warmth. After deciding to use the blaster gear to become someone who can make people smile, Hugo begins testing out the armor with enthusiasm. He transforms repeatedly, trying to understand how to control the power and adjust his movements. His excitement, however, quickly drains his magical energy, causing the transformation to destabilize and eventually collapse. Realizing how physically demanding the armor is, Hugo commits himself to training even harder. He tries different poses, experiments with channeling magic into the bracelet, and pushes himself to improve. Despite stumbling around at first, he's clearly having fun. For the first time, he feels like he's moving toward a future he wants, instead of living under the expectations of his family. Meanwhile, Fi watches him from a distance, worried but smiling, happy to see his big brother genuinely motivated and enjoying something. Fi thinks Hugo may really become a hero someday, not because of the blaster armor, but because of his kindness. The night ends with Yugo exhausted but fired up, determined to master the blaster armor and change his reputation at the academy. The scene shifts away from Yugo and Fi to another character, the blonde boy who had defeated Yugo in the duel earlier. He slips away into a hallway, trembling with excitement, and bursts out laughing. He can't contain his joy as he celebrates. "I did it! I finally did it! I saved Claire-san from that Yugo." His expression twists with obsession and triumph. Then, in narration boxes, he reveals the truth. His name is not Zenon. His real name is Seito. And, just like Yugo, he is a reincarnator from another world. He explains that after dying in an accident, he and several others were guided by a god and reincarnated into the world of a game he used to play obsessively, a fantasy school game called Luminosa Story. He describes the setting of the game. A school-based fantasy world with many characters, each having their own routes and affection systems. The protagonist of the game was a transfer student who formed bonds through various battles and events. The current world he lives in is exactly like that game's world. In short, he's a reincarnator who knows the entire game storyline, and he sees the world around him as the game he once played. He explains the original prologue event of the game's story. Within a month, Yugo was supposed to forcefully kiss Claire Rogue, the game's main heroine and Zenon's favorite character. To prevent this, Zenon intervened early and rescued Claire before the event could happen. He continues describing Yugo's original dark fate in the game's plot. After losing everything, Yugo begins hearing demonic whispers. Desperate for power, he eventually tries to sacrifice his own brother. But even after doing something so horrible, Yugo is still defeated by the protagonist. In the end, Yugo is meant to die a pathetic and despair-filled death. Zenon, whose true identity is the reincarnated Seito, continues gloating to himself. Now that he interfered before the original prologue events could occur, he assumes the other reincarnators will also start moving, but he believes he has gained the advantage. He mocks Yugo's tragic original fate, calling it a perfect ending for trash, and confidently claims he will be the real hero of this world. In his mind, he will be the one who gets the harem, not the original protagonist the game intended. Feeling victorious after saving Claire from Yugo, he plans his next move with a smug grin. "First, I'll enjoy a sweet moment with Claire-san." He walks down the hallway, fully convinced he's secured the perfect route for himself. Zenon, the reincarnated villain, smugly reflects on how because of an otaku hero, meaning Yugo, the game's original heroic story is now going off track. The protagonist who was supposed to shine is losing his place, but no one in this world knows the truth or realizes how the storyline is being distorted. Meanwhile, Yugo, unaware of any of this, walks confidently, determined and full of purpose, ready to forge ahead on his own path. Just as Yugo finishes reflecting on his new resolve, a loud and confident voice echoes through the hallway. A well-dressed student steps forward with a proud smile, placing a hand dramatically over his chest. Calling out Yugo Clay, he declares with theatrical seriousness that he is challenging Yugo to a duel. His tone carries both arrogance and excitement, as if he has been waiting eagerly for this moment. Yugo, caught completely off guard, can only stare at him in confusion. He has no idea who this guy is or why he's suddenly picking a fight. Yet the challenger presses on with enthusiasm, insisting that he will make Yugo fight him, whether Yugo understands what's happening or not. The flamboyant upperclassman steps forward with theatrical flourish, announcing his name with great pride. "I, Marcos Balg, challenge you to a duel." He declares that he will crush Yugo on the battlefield and even tells him to rust beneath his blade, as if he were the main character of some dramatic epic. Yugo, however, is completely out of sync with the mood. He rubs the back of his neck awkwardly, offering an apologetic smile. He admits he has lost his memory and isn't even sure what he supposedly did to provoke this guy. Trying to keep things peaceful, he apologizes just in case. "Sorry if I did something to you earlier, but could you maybe leave me alone for today?" Marcos only laughs smugly, clearly taking Yugo's confusion as arrogance rather than sincerity. Marcos studies Yugo with a tilted head, as if examining some curious specimen. He mutters that he'd heard rumors about Yugo's strange behavior, but now it seems those rumors were true after all. Yugo stands awkwardly across the room, not understanding any of it. But Marcos immediately waves that aside with a dramatic flourish of his gloved hand, his expression brightening with excitement. "It doesn't matter," he declares boldly. "You will fight me, Yugo Clay." Yugo's eyes widen, disbelief written all over his face. This persistent noble clearly won't take no for an answer, even though Yugo hasn't the faintest idea why he's being dragged into a duel in the first place. Marcos smirks with an exaggerated confidence, his tone dripping with arrogance. When Yugo cautiously asks whether he did something terrible to deserve this hostility, Marcos casually replies, "No, nothing in particular." But then he immediately contradicts himself, boasting that he's been fed up with Yugo's attitude for a long time. Now that Yugo has supposedly lost his memories and his magical weapon, Marcos says this is the perfect moment to crush him. He throws his head back in loud, triumphant laughter, declaring that he'll wipe the floor with him during the duel and make sure Yugo never rises again. Yugo, meanwhile, just looks incredibly confused, wondering how things escalated so wildly. Yugo stares at Marcos, baffled by the hostility aimed at him. Trying to understand, he hesitantly asks if anyone ever told Marcos he has a terrible personality. Marcos freezes for a second, Yugo's blunt honesty catching him completely off guard. Still confused but polite, Yugo apologizes and says he can't accept the duel right now. Someone is waiting for him, so they can settle this some other time. He turns to leave, waving casually. Marcos watches him go, conflicted. Yugo's straightforwardness is oddly admirable, but also confusing. What kind of person was the old Yugo clay to be hated so deeply, even by someone like Marcos? Marcos clenches his jaw, unsure how to process the unexpected refusal. Marcos's expression softens into something almost gracious as he waves a hand and tells Yugo not to worry about the duel for now. With a faint smirk, he mentions that Yugo must be making his little brother wait, right? Yugo blinks, puzzled by how abruptly Marcos brought that up until hurried footsteps echo through the hall. Several students rush in and bow toward Marcos, announcing that they brought Yugo's brother just as he ordered. Yugo stiffens in surprise, completely unprepared for whatever Marcos has planned next. Phil is pushed forward by the upperclassman, his small frame tense and his eyes wide as he calls softly, "Nisan." Yugo's expression instantly sharpens, worry and irritation mixing as he steps toward his brother. He turns a glare on Marcos, demanding to know why Phil was dragged into this. Marcos answers with a calm, satisfied nod, praising his men for bringing the boy. "Having Phil here," he says, "will make everything far easier." Yugo feels a chill run through him at those words, realizing Marcos planned something from the start and Phil is now caught right in the middle of it. Phil flinches as one of the boys grips him roughly, but even through the pain he tries to reassure Yugo, insisting he'll be fine and that these guys aren't even strong. His voice shakes, but he still tries to protect his brother in the only way he can, by telling him not to do something reckless for his sake. Marcos, wearing a satisfied smile, explains his intentions as if they were the most natural thing in the world. He brought Phil here to help persuade Yugo. If Yugo won't accept the duel, then Phil will simply take his place. The threat is casual, cruel, and delivered with a lightness that makes Yugo's blood boil. Yugo's eyes narrow, fury rising as he watches Phil struggle. The word bastard slips from between his teeth, too soft for Marcos to hear but heavy with meaning. His fists clench as Phil cries out, and the only thing holding him back is Phil's desperate plea. "Don't do it, Nisan, I'll be fine." But Yugo can see clearly Phil isn't fine, and Marcos has no intention of stopping. The situation becomes impossible to ignore. Marcos tightens his grip on Phil, making the boy wince, and Yugo snaps, shouting for them to stop. But Marcos only smiles smugly, as if he holds all the cards. "Now then," he says, tilting his head mockingly. "What should you do? If you don't care what happens to your little brother, feel free to refuse." The implication is clear: refuse, and Phil suffers. Yugo's face hardens. His fists clench. His anger is barely contained as he stares at Marcos, who continues. "If you want him to avoid any pain, then fight me, Yugo Clay." Yugo exhales once, the tension leaving his shoulders only because he's made his decision. "All right, I understand." He steps forward, accepting the duel, while Marcos watches with a victor's grin, believing he's already won. Yugo stands firm and demands the first condition. "But first, let Phil go. Then I'll accept your duel or whatever you want." Phil panics and cries out, "Nisan? No!" But Yugo doesn't back down, his focus is entirely on getting his little brother safely out of Marcos' hands. Marcos smirks, then waves his hand lazily. "All right, let him go." Phil is released, stumbling forward before Yugo catches him. The boy looks upset and ashamed. "I'm sorry, Nisan, for letting those guys catch me." His voice trembles, but Yugo immediately reassures him. "Don't worry about it, Phil. It's those bastards' fault." His tone is gentle for Phil, but the glare he shoots at Marcos and the others is anything but gentle. Marcos observes the scene with a crooked smile, as if he relishes the contrast. "It's quite endearing how much you love your brother," he murmurs, in his characteristic mocking tone. "To think that you, the lowest of the low, would have any concern for your family." Yugo doesn't remain silent. His expression hardens, and without raising his voice, he strikes back. I'm surprised too. I never thought there were people so immoral. Marcos' smile falters for a moment, but it quickly returns as he descends a few steps, looking down at them. With unnecessary theatricality, he announces, in this duel, we'll wager something. The tension in the room thickens. Phil presses himself closer to Yugo, worried about what his enemy is planning next. Marcos lays out his wager with cruel delight, his voice dripping arrogance. If I win, you'll crawl on the ground and lick my shoes. I'll make you taste the greatest humiliation. Yugo doesn't flinch. His expression hardens, but he answers with a steady, cold voice. Sure, whatever you say. But if I win, you'll never show your disgusting face again. Got it? Marcos bursts into loud, mocking laughter, thrilled by the upcoming spectacle. Your pathetic, miserable figure collapsing, oh, it'll be a show I'll enjoy. Then, with an exaggerated flourish, he gestures forward. Well then, shall we? Let's go, to the place of your miserable defeat. The tension between them sharpens, the duel now unmistakably inevitable. The hallway is buzzing as students gather, whispering among themselves. Is it Yugo again? Hey, is this a duel? Yugo steps forward with a steady, unshaken expression as more people watch. Phil, looking worried, apologizes in a small voice. Nissan, I'm sorry, it's my fault that. But Yugo cuts him off immediately. Why are you apologizing? Didn't I tell you? It's those guys' fault. Then he softens a bit, giving Phil a reassuring smile. Besides, you gave me something really useful for a moment like this. He clenches his fist with determination, ready to face whatever's coming next. Phil panics, tugging at Yugo's sleeve as he warns him. But Blaster is an old model. Magical armors aren't that strong. Yugo gently places a hand on his brother's head, calming him. Don't worry, Phil. He turns with a confident smile, giving a thumbs up. As long as you believe in me, I'll never lose. He takes a few steps forward, back straight, resolve unshakable. Because that's what heroes do. Phil freezes, eyes widening, cheeks flushing. Ha! A hero. The admiration in his gaze grows even stronger as he watches his brother walk toward the duel. Marcos stands proudly in his gleaming armor, its oversized claw-like blade gleaming like polished metal. He tilts his head with a smug smile. How do you feel, Yugo Clay? Ready for your humiliation in front of your brother and the entire audience? Yugo looks him over slowly, then scratches his cheek with an expression that's more confused than intimidated. So that's your magic weapon? Seriously? You've got terrible taste. He squints at the enormous pincer-shaped blade. A crab. Marcos lets out a laugh dripping with condescension. You don't recognize it? This legendary family heirloom, passed down for generations, Giga Scissors? He waves the massive claw as if showing off a priceless treasure. No wonder you were disowned. But Yugo's unimpressed stare doesn't budge. Yugo studies Marcos' armor for a moment, tilting his head. Well, it does look like a magic armor, he mutters. I guess it'll be similar to mine. Then he squints again at the oversized blades. But aren't those Giga Scissors just giant scissors? The thought alone makes him sigh, but when he tightens his fist, his expression hardens. A straightforward villain like you. It's about time you heard my roar. With a sharp motion, he brings his fist across his chest. Light gathers around the bracelet. The transformation begins. Yugo completes his transformation in a burst of light, revealing the full blaster armor, sleek, sharp, and radiating power. He clenches his fist, energy pulsing through the suit. He stands tall and imposing, cape flowing behind him as he faces Marcos, who is now frozen in shock. The duel is about to begin. Marcos mocks Yugo's dramatic transformation poses, laughing, and asking if he's just putting on a show so everyone can make fun of his pathetic armor. But Yugo, fully immersed in his hero spirit, ignores the insults and strikes another bold pose, declaring that Marcos doesn't get it at all. This is the art of being a tokuhiro, a tokusatsu-style hero. From the audience, Phil nervously cheers for his brother, telling him not to lose, while other students root for Marcos, some even shouting that although they dislike Marcos, they hate Yugo even more. The atmosphere is heating up, and the duel is moments away from exploding. Yugo casually asks if the battle has already started, and Marcos immediately shouts the rules at him. The moment both combatants bring out their magical weapons, the duel begins. Victory goes to whoever forces the opponent to stop fighting, knocks them down, or makes them surrender. Yugo nods, saying he gets it, it's simple enough. Then he suddenly takes a stance, clearly preparing to rush forward. Marcos narrows his eyes, realizing Yugo is trying to lure him into close-quarters combat. The fight is about to ignite. Yugo begins muttering to himself, trying to recall the proper sequence for using his armor. He awkwardly raises his right arm, announcing that he's gathering power into it even though he's clearly improvising. The spectators stare in confusion, and even Marcos looks baffled for a moment, wondering if Yugo is putting on yet another pointless performance. As Yugo continues his exaggerated poses, Marcos bursts into mocking laughter, calling him a clown and scoffing at the ridiculous display. But Yugo doesn't pay attention to the jeers. The moment he feels the energy pulse through his arm, he suddenly lunges forward with explosive speed, shouting that now that he's gathered enough power, he's ready to release it. The duel shifts in an instant from jokes to danger. Yugo suddenly unleashes the power he had been gathering, sending a massive shockwave ripping across the arena. The force tears through the air like a spiraling blast, far larger than anything Marcos expected from him. Yugo stands proudly amid the fading shockwave, clearly pleased with himself. He admits he practiced a bit the night before, just enough to pull off a move that would look suitably heroic. The crowd murmurs in surprise at how cleanly his attack landed. He announces, with dramatic enthusiasm, that he'll call this technique Final Fang Vent. The pose he strikes makes it obvious he's copying a tokusatsu hero he admires, and he even thanks that hero in his thoughts, as if dedicating the move to him. But beneath his flashy confidence, Yugo analyzes the situation calmly. The only reason the attack worked so well was because Marcos had dropped his guard, completely unprepared to see Yugo use such a technique. If he tried the same move normally, Marcos would easily dodge it. Still, Yugo smiles to himself, determined to figure out his next step. Yugo just delivered his first special attack, the move he called Final Fang Vent. He didn't expect it to be extremely powerful, he was just excited that he managed to copy a tokusatsu-style hero move. But Marcos, who was extremely confident and arrogant, gets smashed into the ground so hard that the floor cracks. He's completely stunned and humiliated. Marcos can't believe he lost to someone he considers a fool, so he's stuttering in disbelief. "You unforgivable. I lost to this idiot." His followers panic and shout his name. Meanwhile, Yugo is confused. He didn't expect Marcos to go down so easily. He was preparing for a follow-up attack, thinking the fight was just getting started. Phil stares down from the stands with wide, sparkling eyes, barely able to contain his relief. "Hey, Phil," Yugo calls out to him, still trying to understand what just happened, and asks, Did I really just defeat him?" Yugo stares at the crater he created, still shocked. "Did I actually defeat him?" he mutters, unable to believe the result. Up in the stands, Phil's stunned expression slowly softens. "Yeah," he answers, his voice trembling in amazement. He had expected a struggle, anything but this. "I thought it was a bit surprising," he admits, still dazed. The crowd begins murmuring below as the two brothers decide what to do next. "Let's get out of here for now," Yugo says, still overwhelmed. "That's not the point," Phil mumbles, following after him. Meanwhile, Yugo continues thinking aloud, unfazed. "I see, just like I thought. A finishing move really is more exciting when you save it for the end." Yugo slumps on the steps beside Phil, guilt weighing on him. "Sorry, Phil. I didn't just put you in danger. Because of all that, we even missed lunch." Phil immediately shakes his head, his eyes bright. "You don't have to worry about that. What's more important?" Yugo calls his name softly, and Phil turns toward him with a spark of excitement. "It was amazing how you used Blaster. Being able to fire magic shots right from the start, that's exactly what I expected from you, Nissan." Yugo rubs the back of his neck, flustered by the praise. "Well..." Phil clasps his hands together with admiration, practically glowing as he looks up at his brother. Yugo glances down at his armored suit, still confused. "Are you sure this armor is really an old model? I took Marcos down with a single hit, so I thought maybe it was some kind of special gear." Phil quickly shakes his head. "That's not the case. Blaster is a mass-produced model from decades ago." "Ha, really? But it looks cool, and it feels pretty durable." Phil sighs lightly, slipping into explanation mode. "First of all, magic armors aren't actually that strong. And while it's true they offer good defense," he lifts his hands emphatically, insisting, "they don't exponentially boost your abilities." Phil continues explaining calmly. To start with, any rookie knight can enhance their physical abilities with magic, and they can also protect themselves using barriers. Yugo nods slowly. "Now that you mention it, that's true." Phil adds, "If you can strengthen yourself without armor, then there's no need to wear a heavy full body suit, right?" Yugo scratches his cheek, thinking aloud. But magical weapons are still improving, aren't they? What if they use lightweight, sturdy metals to make a full-body magic suit? Phil continues explaining with a calm, matter-of-fact tone. Just making a single magic armor takes a lot of time and effort. And if you consider the cost, it's not practical to mass-produce them. Yugo stares, surprised. I see. Phil goes on, and if you're attacking with another magic weapon, then there's no real point in wearing the armor in the first place. The rest is just convenience. Blaster can channel magic into its limbs, but it doesn't really have any other functions. After Phil's detailed explanation, Yugo forces a smile, trying to hide how crushed he feels. Thanks for the explanation, he mutters, even though the truth weighs heavily on him. Sitting beside his brother, he finally admits to himself a sad reality. In this world, being a henshin hero isn't actually practical. While clenching his hands in frustration, he thinks, heroes who transform are cool, but in a world where people can become strong without transforming at all, efficiency ends up beating coolness every time. That truth stings far more than losing a fight ever could. Phil tries to lift Yugo's spirits a little, explaining that magical armors didn't disappear completely. Some magical weapons are still passed down through prestigious families, he says. Hearing that, Yugo's mind flashes back to Marcos and the insults he hurled earlier, the way he sneered about Yugo being the family disgrace, the lowest of the low. His fists clench at the memory. Inherited? Yugo mutters, his eyes narrowing. Like Marcos's scissors? Phil notices the shift in his brother's mood, but before he can comment, Yugo turns toward him. Hey, Phil, there's something I want to ask you. Yugo sits quietly for a moment before finally voicing what has been bothering him. Phil, why do you go so far for me? Why are you so kind to me? He remembers scattered fragments of his past, how everyone in the academy seemed to hate him. I don't remember much, but I was the most disliked person there, right? Everyone still sees me as an enemy, and lately, I've realized just how much people around me despise me. His voice lowers. But you were the only one who cared. Phil smiles softly, as if the answer is obvious. Because you're my benefactor, Nissan. Those simple words, spoken with sincerity, hit Yugo deeply. Phil speaks softly, as if revisiting memories he's kept buried for years. You might not remember because of your amnesia, but back then, you were the only one in the house who was kind to me. He explains how he was born frail, with no talent for becoming a magic knight. Because of that, mother and father were always cold to me. I even started to believe I wasn't worthy of anything. Yugo listens closely as Phil continues. But then, you changed me, Nissan. Yugo blinks in surprise. Me? Phil nods. Yes, you were the one who made me feel like I mattered. Phil smiles softly as he recalls Yugo's old words that changed his life. Maybe you don't have talent to be a magic knight, but you do have talent as a researcher. You told that to me, the son of a concubine. He remembers how Yugo also promised him, when I become the head of the house, I'll make you my right hand. The fact that someone who barely knew him looked at him with warmth and belief. That made me so happy, Phil admits. Thanks to that, I was able to enter the Luminous Academy. I worked hard to give everything I had, so I could become someone worthy of being your right hand. Phil smiles brightly, his eyes soft with admiration. If it weren't for you, Nissan, I might have spent my whole life stuck in that house where I didn't belong. He places a hand on his chest, speaking from the heart. Everything I know, everything I've become, it's all thanks to you, Nissan. He remembers the old Yugo, confident, inspiring, unbeatable. You were so cool back then, Nissan. Saying you'd never lose, and then actually winning, you were incredible. Phil is reassuring Yugo after everything that happened. He tells him that he truly believes in him, no matter what anyone else says. To him, he's someone who won't lose as long as he keeps being himself. His words give Yugo a boost of confidence. Hearing that Phil trusts him so deeply makes him feel determined again. He realizes he can't let himself get discouraged. So he decides right there that he'll keep improving, not just for himself, but so he can become a big brother Phil can proudly look up to. Phil's words hit Yugo straight in the heart. He tells him with complete conviction that he will succeed, because to him, he's nothing less than a hero. His face lights up with admiration, and the sincerity behind his smile leaves him momentarily speechless. Hearing that, something tightens inside Yugo. He hasn't figured out his place in this new world yet, but Phil's trust gives him a direction. He feels the urge to live up to the expectations he has in him, to become someone worthy of being called his hero. With a quiet, grateful voice, he thanks him because his belief is exactly what he needed to move forward. Yugo gathers himself after Phil's heartfelt encouragement. With a determined look, he tightens his fist and makes a quiet promise to himself. This time, he'll protect the people who believe in him. The resolve in his eyes shows how deeply his words affected him. He isn't just trying to survive anymore. He wants to live up to the trust placed in him. Right after that emotional moment, things shift back to something simple and warm. Phil reminds him that they still haven't eaten, suggesting they head to the cafeteria. And the two of them walk off together, ending the moment with a bit of everyday normalcy after all the intensity. Then we see Zenon hurries through the academy, clearly shaken as whispers of the duel reach him. He can't understand how something like this happened so suddenly, or why no one mentioned it before. The more he hears, the more unsettled he becomes, especially when he learns the duel was between Yugo and Marcos. He mutters to himself, confused and tense. Even though he knows the world through the game he once played, this event was never part of it. The fact that something so major happened without existing in his memories makes him realize the world is starting to diverge from what he thought he knew. In this scene, the blonde boy is trying to make sense of what happened. He knows this world from a game he played, so he compares everything to how the story was supposed to go. As he thinks about Marcos, he remembers that Marcos Bulb was a student from the same year as the protagonist and someone the player could eventually recruit. In the game story, Marcos acted arrogant and caused trouble, but he wasn't important for long. As the plot moved forward, he became more and more irrelevant. Even though he didn't like Yugo in the original story, Marcos never fought him or got involved with Yugo's special magic weapon at all. Instead, his event in the game was completely different. He would challenge the protagonist to a duel because he thought the protagonist was weaker. But now, in this world, things have changed. Marcos actually fought Yugo, something that never happened in the game. Realizing this, the blonde boy understands that the story he knew is starting to shift in ways he didn't expect. In the original game story, Marcos eventually becomes friends with the protagonist. After he loses his duel against the MC, he realizes his weaknesses, grows from the loss, and joins the heroes group. From there, Marcos and the protagonist push each other to get stronger. A classic rival becomes ally arc. But now, in this world, things happen differently. Yugo, the reincarnated guy, defeated Marcos before the protagonist ever got involved. On top of that, Yugo's magical weapon Galendil was confiscated afterward, something that never happened in the original story. Because of that huge change, Marcos ended up viewing Yugo as his threat instead of the main character. So this explains why Marcos challenged Yugo. He feared Yugo because of Galendil, even though the actual Yugo right now doesn't even have it anymore. Everything the guy explaining this is realizing boils down to, this is why Marcos acted so differently from what happened in the game. Zenon is panicking a bit as he analyzes what just happened with Marcos and Yugo. He's basically thinking, did I accidentally break the story by defeating Yugo too early? He knows that changing major events from the original game can cause huge ripple effects, so he's taking this seriously. Fortunately, Marcos wasn't a super important or fan-favorite character, so altering his route isn't as dangerous as messing with a main heroine or a top-ranked character. He's relieved that none of the other reincarnators recruited Marcos yet, otherwise, they might notice the timeline deviation and things could get messy. But just as he's comforting himself, he suddenly remembers something related to popular characters, which surprises him, likely because this could be a bigger issue than Marcos. Zenon now shifting his attention to one of the main heroines of the game, someone whose popularity is on the same level as Claire, meaning she's a top-tier, central character in the story. The moment he remembers her, his whole attitude changes. He feels a little guilty about Claire, but his gamer instincts kick in hard. He's thinking like someone who's played too many dating sims. If you get reincarnated, of course you aim for a harem, right? So his plan becomes, target this heroine first, then go after Claire afterward. He's basically treating the world like a game, planning romance routes as if nothing could go wrong, totally unaware that pushing the story off course could cause more chaos. Yugo and Phil make their way into the academy cafeteria, taking in the wide, lively space. Phil seems amazed by how big and fancy it is, but before they can settle in, a couple of students approach them and not in a friendly way. One of them immediately mocks Yugo, acting like he's greeting him politely but twisting it into an insult. He points out that since Yugo was disowned, he doesn't even deserve to be called Yugo Clay anymore, just Yugo. Another chimes in with a sneer, asking if Yugo even has food to eat, hinting that he's practically living like an outsider. Their tone makes it clear, they came over just to look down on him. Yugo listens to the boys mocking him, but instead of getting angry, he leans into it with a strangely calm honesty. He admits the situation is embarrassing, being disowned, depending on Phil, but he doesn't try to hide it. He even starts thinking out loud about practical things, like how if he really has to camp outside, he'll need a tent sturdy enough to withstand rain and wind. That completely throws the bullies off. They expected him to get flustered or defensive, not to treat their insults like a normal conversation. And Yugo just keeps going, saying he'll need to earn money on his own now, so he genuinely asks them if they know any part-time jobs he can take. The two guys are so stunned they don't know how to respond. Right then, someone else overhears him, a girl with long hair steps in suddenly and asks, surprised, "Hey, are you looking for a job?" Yugo turns, confused by the unexpected interruption. The girl steps forward with a bright, confident smile, completely different from the mocking tone of the boys earlier. Without hesitation, she invites Yugo to join her. She doesn't explain the details yet, but her tone suggests she already has something in mind for him. Then she introduces herself enthusiastically. Her name is Meltsudo. Her cheerful greeting, paired with her friendly energy, immediately stands out, especially compared to the tense atmosphere just moments before. It's as if she's swooping in to pull Yugo out of an awkward situation and offering him a chance at something better.